to those markets. And this is the financial disruption of terror groups, if I'm correct.
Close enough.
Close enough.
Whose slide is it anyway?
We're giving you $10.
They're coming down here now. Darren's on his way down. All right. Okay, if you remember Darren from last year, he was kind of one of the, that was his rookie year, and I think he did a wonderful job, and so I stuck him in. I'm going to let him introduce my stuff. However, now because of the fact that he works in a certain place, he can only talk up to a certain point on this presentation. But go ahead and introduce the concept if you would, please, sir.
Cool. So,
You can stick up around up here as well.
ISIS is this massive insurgency group in the East. Maybe you've heard of them.
Oh,
They have a ridiculous cash flow. The current method of dealing with them is dubious. Let's find a new way to do it. So what is not this report? This report is not anti-Islamic. This report is not classified, nor is it complete. It is designed to make you think outside of a box. That is the hope of this report. All right, I have to be wheels up in 2 hours on a flight to Washington.
And I was right, so
he's my rhyme. So we're going to blow through all of this in 20 seconds. The highlight is in the 1300s, this guy, Tamia, he's an Islamic scholar, and he hangs out in Egypt. The Mughal Empire is about to invade the Egyptians, and the Mughal Empire just converted to Islam to invade the Egyptians. A big thing in Islam is you cannot kill a fellow Muslim. So the Egyptians are confused. What do we do? How do we fend off the invaders? Well, killing fellow Muslims. This guy comes up with an idea. You can deem them to be bad Muslims, and therefore they must die. That is called takfir. True story.
And it's not a Klingon weapon either.
Unfortunately, this guy is now the most profligate and cited author by all jihadis across the face of the planet. Why? You are a bad Muslim. I must kill you. How does that work? Run across the Mideast killing people. So today, the region is driven by oil, power, politics, and religion. That is a nice nexus of problems. Moving along, so how do we end up with ISIS? Here's the short story. We invaded Iraq. The guy in charge is Paul Bremer. He ran the CPA. First thing he does, give me this. Cool. So first thing he does, ban the Ba'athist party in all forms. The Ba'athists were like the Nazis. They ran everything. The schools, the maintenance plants, the gyms, everything is run by Ba'athists. There are no Ba'athists. There is no state because no one knows how to turn on the power. Step 2, dismantle the Iraqi army and the Iraqi intelligence service. So the only thing you have in Iraq, you have a bunch of unemployed guys who cannot get jobs. They're displeased. And by the way, they're good at guerrilla warfare. They're now very upset. You now have all the framework for a growing insurgency. The first car bomb, I think in July of 2003 is the first bombing. Moving along, this is Iraq in 2005. The important color is yellow. Yellow indicates mixed neighborhoods. This is downtown Baghdad. This is 2007. A lot less yellow. Good job, car bombs. This is the green zone, by the way. That is the green zone. So this is what took place in Iraq over 3 years: ethnic cleansing and genocide in a light form. Anyone told you otherwise? Did not go. Now, the Islamic State, February of 2006, they blow up the Golden Dome Mosque, this massive, important mosque. Everybody gets very upset. In between February and June of 2006, the U.S. Army in Iraq has one goal: destroy AQI, because they're inciting genocidal warfare against each other. The guys, during this 5-month period, the U.S. government kills or captures 36 out of 42 members of AQI. Those who escape go to Syria. Those who escape, it's some sort of crude Darwinian practice as well. Those who got out know how to evade U.S. practices and can evade us finding them, and they're very good at it. And that's part of the problem you have with ISIS today. They're just really good at hiding. And so basically, they went to Syria, screwed around, kind of put the band back together. And they did. This is the really, really Cliff Notes version of 40 years of intricate warfare in Syria. They kind of put the band back together, hung out with al-Nusra, and then said, we don't think so. And so here you have sort of, when they talk about the caliphate, this is sort of their dream and what it is they're trying to do. They're trying to sort of return the old lands as defined in the Quran as sort of holy land to under the one caliphate. Caliphate is not a state, it is a creature. They do not believe in states. So why discuss ISIS in any means? Because, well, we're trying the kinetic thing. We are the coalition forces, the Iraqi government is, the Iranians are, and it's not really working. That is because it is not the true center of gravity. The true center of gravity is, in fact, the ideology behind the group. Charlie Hebdo, just the one case, is done by AQI. The guys never went to the Mideast train. They sort of did it on their own. 7733, 2 more terror attacks inspired by AQ. Not directly done by them. There are lots of cases recently arrested here in the States of a bunch of ISIS supporters trying to ship arms and everything else.
Extra,
Yes.
extra, read all about it. You know, race to stop ISIL in USA. That's our headline, by the way, for Monday, if you don't read USA Yesterday.
So, kinetic forces don't really work against this group. That said, let us now discuss the Fourth Punic War. There was no Fourth Punic War. The Third Punic War ends when Rome razes Carthage to the ground. That really is not an option in the modern world, so we have to discuss new methods to deal with ISIS. Let's talk about their money and how they and sort of their foreign fighters and their ideology. That is where I have to stop.
Okay. So what happens is we're finding out that, is this jihadi tourism or they're going home? You stick around and get that color. Let's things like that. Okay, so what happened is they declare a caliphate in June of 2014. The caliphate says, basically, we're going to reestablish the high watermark of Islam. Now, if you're a believer and you're highly influenceable, you're going to think, wow, this rocks, okay? This is like going in and saying, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go all the way to the Super Bowl. And so what it provides is a recruiting incentive for young people to say, I want to be part of this, and also for theologians who can be kind of co-opted into that vision. And so now what you have is sort of these tourism, you know, is it like a jihad tourism? You're going to go ahead, hey, let's go kill some people this summer, and then come on back home and go back to your university degree here at the United States of America. And now the thing is, you kind of got this intersection between the psychopaths, the people who are actually probably more sociopaths, the true believers, and the pragmatists. And somewhere in there, you find this whole influence thing, as Max was talking about. You can create these cultural memes in here. And so what's interesting, though, is you think about where these foreign fighters are coming from and everything like that. But it doesn't take a whole lot, because if you think about it from the recruiting perspective, you're looking at that front page of the paper I passed around a little bit, which is talking about on Monday morning, you know, ISIS and U.S. But what was on the next day?
Well, before that, look at the picture above is the earthquake, and then you see the headline, so automatically you're going to...
Yeah, that's the yellow journalism. But here's the crazy thing. Where's the real problem that's going on this week? It's in Baltimore, okay? What's happening there? We're seeing social fabric being ripped apart. We saw that mom, the mom of the month, going up there and bitch slapping her little boy, saying, you get that mask off right now and you get back home. All right, lucky kid.
Notice that the moment that happened, ISIS jumped on the Baltimore riots and said, keep it going, our brothers.
What they're showing then is the fact that you can take a subculture within a country, and France is a whole lot worse because they have not allowed the Islamic culture to integrate. And so if you're Muslim and you live in France, you are living in a subculture and you are oppressed and you're in the equivalent of the ghettos and you're not being treated all that well. And so the idea being, say, hey, let's look at the black experience in America. Let's draw some parallels to that. And as you find out these influenceable 16-year-old kids, instead of saying like, hey, let's go down to the CVS and apply for the job, it's like, hey, let's go down and burn the thing down. And what's happening is it's working because these kids don't have reference points. They don't understand the benefit of the society they're living in. They can be easily influenced by some of these things. They get pulled away. I think the problem is this. Remember our dear Dr. Gene Schultz, okay? He worked, he developed kind of the incident handling process, the preparation, identification, containment, eradication, restoration, lessons learned. Pickerel. Well, the thing is, containment comes before eradication. Okay, so what does that mean? Back in Syria 2.5 years ago, we had a chance to schwack these buggers. And what happened is that Putin says, oh, you know, we think you should be peaceful. You shouldn't involve military, so why don't you go ahead and sign up for a little peace idea? Okay, and so our diplomats do that.
In infrastructure, building pipelines with all this.
And oh, by the way, where's the only warm water port that Russia had in 2013? Yeah, Syria. Oh, now they got a new one in Crimea, but that's besides the point. But you start to see the pattern here. Okay, so we failed, we took the bait, and then what happens is we go forward now. Now it's out of the container. Now there's 1,000 of these little boogers running around inside your house. You didn't get your teenager or your 8-year-old kid with the box full of cockroaches on the front porch. You got to go ahead and stop every single one. It's out of control. And there's some serious territory that we're talking about. Because if you look at it, they're not just worried about just getting geography. You see these little black lines in the core areas. They're getting core communications, as you heard yesterday and the day before, talking about what did the Romans do? They gave them their ability to control huge amounts of territory. They built the roads. These guys just took over the roads. So what they have is huge influence areas. They can move forces very, very quickly. And as they go forward, what they do is they kind of work like a locust swarm, and they're going to go ahead and empty out the banks. They're going to grab all the money. They're going to grab all the resources. If they need to, go ahead and kill a bunch of people and then go on further. So what happens is as you go forward, you start to accumulate more and more wealth, and it works pretty well. So there's some serious territory out there. Now we're concerned about what? Uh-oh, they got chemical weapons. You think they're going to go ahead and abide by Geneva Conventions and all the other treatments?
Yes. No.
Oh, okay. Well, you want to ride to the airport? Don't disagree.
But if you can't trust immolating, beheading jihadi.
Yes.
While we're at the airport,
I don't care. My flight's at 7:45. I'll be okay.
You can't trust beheading.
Creating PR problems for ISIS. Because when they came out with that thing where they set that pilot on fire, a whole lot of people are going horrified. You can't do that to a fellow Muslim. And all of a sudden, what they thought was going to work turned out to work very much against them. And they literally had to come with talking points, kind of like when the president misspoke, or you have to come up with something like that. Then they go out there trying to inform, saying, well, look at this verse, look at this verse, look at this verse. If you look at the Quran is not chronological. How are they ordered? How are the surahs put in? By size. The biggest ones first, and they get down to the smallest one at the end. It has nothing to do with chronology. And so the problem is that what's happening is the reinterpretation, the memes that they're creating. They're going through and they're saying, well, hey, the most recent ones supersede the oldest ones, and therefore we're going to go ahead and say, well, this is it. In the early beginnings, if we look at that slide that we blew over in 20 seconds, we find out that Islam started out very peaceful, and it was actually creating the equivalent of welfare state and taking care of people and was feeding people, and it worked out pretty well. It wasn't until the very end they started running into armed opposition. And so that's what the guys are doing, is they're going ahead and they're attacking this, trying to say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to use and twist this religion to go ahead and reinforce our position. And ISIS is to Islam what the KKK is to Christianity. Okay? They're going to say they're all going to go to church on Sunday morning, but there's something seriously wrong with their interpretation. So the current plan is what? Keep calm and blow stuff up. What the hell? We're good at that. You know, we got a big defense budget. I spent 30 years in the military. Okay, fine. I get it. I understand what we're doing with it. The problem is that it's not working too well because it's going ahead and it's creating a resistance. People are hunkering down and they feel like they got a common enemy, that predator drone or that person walking around with full body armor. And so the good news is they're running out of friends. They're pretty nasty. Okay, the takfir. Okay, takfir, as we described, no, it's not the Klingon or Vulcan weapon, but it's basically going around and saying to a Muslim, you're no longer a Muslim. Therefore, I can take your daughter and use her as a sex slave for my troops. And because she's not a real Muslim, she's not really real. And so therefore, you still have the concept of these young men being recruited to guard the honor of young Muslim women. It's part of the recruiting message, but yet they're going to go out there and gang rape some poor female just because she's now been declared not to be that. But otherwise, no women, no booze, no music, not a lot of fun. Hey, that was kind of like being on a ship 30 years ago. Oh, we had Marines. We had someone to dance with on Saturday nights. So everybody's mad at these guys. And it gets worse. But the thing is, we can exploit that. Okay, we can go ahead and look at political warfare. We can figure out how do we go ahead and do that. How about cyber attack? We're totally supposed to be good at that, but how do you go after an opponent who has very, very little dependency on a cyber infrastructure? That makes asymmetric warfare work against us. So yes, we got huge intelligence networks. Yes, we go ahead with Rumsfeld, with shock and awe. We're going to come in there with a network warfare. We're going to go with the minimum number of people to go ahead and whack everybody. And then when we found out, General Shinseki said, no way, you need more boots on ground. They fired the dude, and then it turned out he was right, because you can't go ahead and do it that way. The diplomacy is not going to work. Okay, what are you going to do, demarche them? Oh yeah, we're so sorry about that. We're going to stop. But the theological tax might start working, but the problem is it's going to take a long, long time to go ahead and create these new schools of thought. How do you raise an imam and get them then to become the person you listen to?
Well, if it started back in
2001,
2001, they'd be 15
yeah.
years old right now, and then we'd only have to wait another 5 years.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is that if you look at the early state of Islam, they didn't take 2 or 3 generations to go ahead and convert a population. You come in, you kill the men, you rape the women. Within 1 generation, you have a whole new army of soldiers that are totally loyal to whatever you told them to do. Works pretty well, but of course we don't work that way, so it's a little bit difficult.
Thankfully.
So here's the thing, if the caliphate cannot govern, though, they're going to lose their legitimacy, because once you declare yourself a caliphate, you're in for the whole shebang. You got to provide roads and schools and bridges. You have to keep the water running. You got to keep the lights on and things like that. You have to make payroll. And as a result, you now have a vulnerability you didn't have in something like Al-Qaeda, which is a hit and run, where you didn't have to go ahead and keep the lights on, and so you could disappear. We need a new, sort of an unexpected strategy, something with fear, surprise, ruthless efficiency, and all this fanatical devotion as well. But of course, nice red uniform. And we got to start thinking completely differently about all this stuff. So we'll look at their funding sources. So we estimate they've already looted about $500 million from banks. First place you go when you go in there, you grab all the currency. Now, the thing is, if you've only got a local currency, you have a hard time exchanging it internationally. But dollars are golden. It's wonderful because you can move these things across the border. Of course, extorting farmers because they're now controlling the breadbasket in this area. And now, if you're down there in that part of Iraq and Syria, now when you can control where the food is, you can control what the people are. You control them by the stomach, their heads and minds will follow. Sell oil at the barrelhead. That we're going after with kinetic stuff, but they're still doing a robust black market business. And they do that for cold hard currency. The forcible zakat, the 10% that you give to the poor to help out your community. Well, that's being forced on everybody. Now, you go down, even if you try to do a cash transaction, there's somebody there taking a little percentage of it. And it's all going to support all this stuff, kidnapping. They're buying other people's hostages. Hey, we can get it from you for 10,000 and auction them off for $1 million, or behead them. The artifacts in the black market, the estimates have been over $7 billion. Not all going to these guys, but a huge amount. These guys have been dumb up to this point. They're just breaking and cracking up these 7,000-year-old artifacts. They should sell them to make more money. Foreign donors is a problem. We see a lot of that coming from places like Saudi Arabia. So how well are they doing? Director of Counterterrorism. They're the best finance group we've ever seen. This is serious trouble. What's the one secret weapon that America has that could totally dismantle the finances of the best financial organization it's ever seen? How about this? Well, here's the Clinton Foundation staff, okay? Hey, we can't find your money anymore. And we don't know where your emails are either. But the point is, we want to go after the disruption of the financials. In Hawaii in 1942, what happened is after Pearl Harbor, with the United States, they issued currency stamps and everything. They basically yanked all of the currency off of that island in the whole area, and also went out there to the Marshall Islands. There were overprints. You can't see to them back there, big letters, Hawaii, brown seals, overprint. What happens now when the Japanese occupy the islands? You just declare everything with a brown seal invalid. And now they've captured all the money out of the banks, and you say, go away. So why don't we start doing that? Why don't we go ahead and poison the currency in these territories instead of just issuing them pallets of $100 bills like we were handing out? They should have been pallets of $100 bills with special colored serial numbers or whatever. Say, hey, these will work, and they'll continue to work as long as you guys are working with us. But the day you stop, we go ahead and we turn them all off. That allows us to do stuff like that. Also, network operations against foreign wealthy donors. How do we go ahead and influence those folks and things like that? There's a great way to go ahead. You guys can come up with some of these things there about ransomware and things like that, but think about it. We're finding out that in the West, we're paying ransomware, we're paying for hard drives to get decrypted, but I really like the idea of being able to go ahead and create these watering holes. You kind of look like they're, give a donation, maybe even pass on some of the donations to the real bad guys so they feel they're getting something, but what we get is the intelligence value of knowing who everybody is, so they can go ahead, call downstream, say, yeah, we did get the money, but we intercepted along the way. Because it's not so much stopping the money, but it is stopping the source. And if we can then go back and influence it, the hard part is you got places like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and now you can't really go in there and start schwacking citizens of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because ostensibly that we're considered to be partners and allies. Although
the challenge is when you start naming foreign donors or even looking at foreign donors, they start suing you in the UK and take your books out of print.
And they're all kinds of other things happen. And they say, hey, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to drive all your wildcatters out of business, and we're going to drop the price of oil, which means all your fracking goes down here.
How much of this is cash versus bits?
Think about it.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
asking.
the problem with this is that the cash, they've got renewable money that has nothing to do with bits. They get their money through extortion. They get their money through going ahead with the oil. They get their money by going ahead and the forcible zakat, by going ahead and extorting money. But the problem is when you run over a territory and you consume all the resources like a locust, you can't go back in and reload. It's gone. And you can't just keep going over and over again. So what happens is they've got to keep expanding their territory to be able to keep up this funding source. And that links to their supply chains and things like that, which also creates, again, a fundamental weak point that we can go after. Because much like you looked at happened in 1950s, 1951, as we went into the Korean War, and the North Koreans came almost all the way down past Busan, they almost drove us off the continent. What happened? Come in Incheon, that left hook up there, cut their supply chains and almost rolled it all the way back up to the Yalu River. And so the idea is can we allow them to overextend themselves by channeling them and funneling them in areas where we know we can go ahead and interdict? Because if you can isolate them to one geographic area long enough, they're going to burn themselves out. You're not going to out-influence them. You're not going to bomb them to death. You've got to create the seeds of destruction from within that own organization. And it's got to die from within. Much like they say America can never be conquered by somebody else, but we can kill ourselves. We can do it through problems that we're creating in terms of social and too much of this and that, the other thing. Same type of lesson there. Kinetic attacks under the way and things like that. What about critical infrastructures? Okay, we've got 16 critical infrastructures here that we declare, but we've counted about 5 of them that they really care about. But water's in short supply in a lot of those parts of the world. Don't necessarily want to poison the population. That's like kind of evil. We're not that evil. You could drug it and cause everybody to get really cool, man. Now it's a lot easier to take them over. But we got to start thinking about stuff like that, which means we got to get back to the bad stuff that we used to have, the secret things that were done by the intelligence agencies that have been pretty much been castrated by Congress recently because they don't like the fact that, well, they happen to be listening to their emails or they're listening to their stuff. We need to be able to have a way to operate in a way with some plausible deniability, which means maybe we need some bad guys. Hey, who doesn't really care about the rule of warfare? Who are the baddest folks over there in that whole region? Anybody ever work with the Uzbeks? All right, those guys are mean. They're nasty. There's only one problem. They're 88% Muslims. So you've got to really have a way to go ahead and get around that, to get around all that stuff like that. But you go ahead and you look at some of the things that took place, even going ahead at some of the warfare. Who do you have as a proxy warrior that doesn't feel they need to maintain our fine, nice values? And therefore,
they'll bankrupt them.
say again?
Send in the Nigerians.
Send in the Nigerians, yeah. They're gonna, and they got $1 million from a prince. And so there's a lot of tools that are out there. But the thing is that now children are traveling to fight in the war zone. These propaganda films, which you watch them, they're like tourist videos. It's like Private Benjamin. But what we're trying to do is they're trying to recruit people and they're falling for it. They're being recruited from a lot of countries that otherwise you would think there would be no interest for people leaving. Why would they leave France? Well, we started to understand some of the social immiscibility that their culture is. You can move to France, but you never become a Frenchman. You can move to Japan, you never become Japanese. You move to the United States, you can become American. And it's that difference that we have here, and yet we still have subcultures as we see in Baltimore. And you go back and you look at Stanley Milgram. You remember his experiments that he did back in the 60s where he went ahead and he's had people go ahead and say, you're going to be applying voltages to this other person and they get questions wrong, up to the point where this person is receiving a lethal dose and there's a guy standing there with a lab coat. And when people get a little worried, go ahead, continue with the test. We accept responsibility, continue. And they determined that they could probably recreate Nazi Germany in small town America because people would just listen and follow rules.
The one lady that actually said no was a survivor of the Holocaust.
How about that?
Wow.
So what we find then is that people are compliant. We have these socializations that say that if somebody else takes responsibility for my actions, I don't care anymore. And so what happens is if you set up authority, I mentioned Cialdini a little bit earlier, but if you look at Cialdini and the science of influence, he's got 6 different reasons why people do stuff. There could be scarcity, like sign up by tonight, or the sale's over, or other things like that. But one of them is authority. And authority, when someone says, do it, people will tend to do that. And that authority can work positively or negatively. Our authority here in the United States comes from what? Kind of law and order a little bit, but also maybe from mom, whacking you upside the head. But over there in a theocracy, there is no difference between religion and government, between life and worship. Your entire life as a devout Muslim is the worship of Allah. And everything you do and everything you say and every action you take is all part of that daily walk in worship. And we think, hey, we go to church once a week on Sunday. They're praying 5 times a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. All right? It is absolutely engraved in part of who they are. We have to somehow create the concept and the understanding that ISIS is not genuine. That for those who are easily influenced because they fail to be able to discern the difference between propaganda and truth, because they've lost the ability to do critical thinking. And the danger in any society has that if it's oppressive and you raise a society of critical thinkers, you will no longer be in control. But if you are not oppressive, if you're actually a government of the people, by the people, for the people, critical thinkers help keep you free. The problem is that we've ceded that responsibility to Hollywood, we ceded it to educators, we ceded it to people who are off there pursuing their own individual goals. And as a result, we're sowing the own seeds of our destruction here, which allows for recruitment base and people to go ahead in other parts of the world. So delegitimize them theologically. Okay, you take a look. The biggest fear from the Bin is humor. The Italian example, tell me about that.
So ISIS in Libya sent a message to chill the Italian nation's very bones. They said, we are coming for you, Rome. And the Italians, in great fear, sent back, don't take the interstate, the traffic is terrible. And while you're on the way, stop at my cousin Joey's place. There's a great happy hour special. And by the way, try the veal. It's fantastic. In short, it didn't work. They didn't care. They weren't afraid of them. It kind of blew up in their face.
The church, this is how an Italian dies.
Yeah. And fear is what's the only weapon they got? Fear for the West and false promises for the recruits. We have to break that perception side of it. You get into that OODA loop and things like that. Yes, kids are deciding to go ahead and do this jihad tourism. But if you want to put in
wouldn't
that
mass humor, well, I totally agree, but wouldn't mass humor that worked effectively in propaganda in World War II, wouldn't mass humor against ISIS / ultimately Islam is going to get nailed in the middle of this? Doesn't that create 100 Charlie Hebdos?
When you say
You can't attack Islam. That's the wrong target.
you have to attack the appearance, not the.
You have to
Not
attack
the
the
belief
bastardization.
Yeah, show that they're, show that
Yes,
they're.
sir. I got 5 minutes. I got 3 people getting to the airport.
In answer to what you're saying, Wayne, the answer is no, because in their culture, if humor doesn't come from family, they don't consider it effective.
Yeah, it's very, very family oriented. When I was over there in the Middle East, I was in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. If you're in family, you can talk. If you're not part of the family, but oh, by the way, the culture over there, I was over there at the beginning of Ramadan, was invited over to this gentleman's house, for his father's house for iftar. So 10 brothers and sisters, 47 grandchildren, 17 great-grandchildren, all sitting on the floor around the table, and me, which is very, very welcoming. It's like bringing somebody in traditional Saudi garb to Thanksgiving dinner to meet your grandmother. We probably would not think that way. Extraordinarily welcome if you look at Islam as it's supposed to be. It's a very warm and welcoming type of a culture and a religion. And if we understand that. So what happened is we're even luring women over there. That's a spoof, by the way. It's not just Nutella kittens, but it's an interesting idea that there are being things, people telling about that. So they declared themselves a caliphate. What does that mean? It means that they have to live up to the role or they're going to fail. And if we can go ahead and allow them to fail by helping them along the way, breaking critical infrastructures, financial disruption, they can't make payroll. The people that are supposed to depend on them thinking this is better, find out it's not. You're not going to deal very well with the psychopaths because they're going to go there. They want to kill to kill. Those are the sociopaths. Those are people that are mentally ill. They're getting out of our society and they're all going over there, kind of like a Cuba boat lift in reverse. But the problem is, can you get them over there and keep them there? The social services are expensive. They try to do their own currency. We can go ahead and go after that. They won't because the U.S. dollar is infinitely fungible over there for now. But ultimately, if we can go ahead and go after the radical imams, if they can be discredited because they believe they get a special privileges that everybody else does not. So over in Islam, if you're a good Muslim, it's a man, you get 4 wives. But hey, if you're up there at the top, you can get a whole lot more. And things like that. So it's an unequal society. It's never been one of equality. There's never a concept of democracy. It's idiotic for Americans to think that we're going to sow the seeds of democracy in an Islamic world. Rather, what we need to do is get them back onto the true path of what Islam is supposed to be all about, weed out these spin-off things that are crazy like that, and we can probably return to some sense of normalcy, and then remove the ability for them to do that by increasing the education, by increasing the skills, the ability, the way for people to get jobs and things like that. Because if you look at places like Horn of Africa, the U.S. has been investing their time in there for the last 12 years. You go down to places like that, they're building roads, schools, and bridges. They're building wells. They're inoculating the goats and things like that against disease. So when the recruiters come through to say, come kill Americans, they go, but my children are alive because of American doctor. We have a well because of American engineers. No, I don't want to kill Americans. They've been good to us. And so the whole concept of going ahead and putting warheads on foreheads has to change a little bit to the concept of what Rumsfeld said, this is the long war. And the long war is going to now take us several generations because we blew it for the first 15 years. But by going ahead and changing the hearts and minds, we can erode the recruiting base of groups like this. And eventually they will starve from within because there is going to be attrition. They put themselves in line of fire and they can get shot up from time to time. If they can't replenish their numbers, it's going to fade out and die. And we do that, we win. I believe that's all, folks. Got something Yes, ma'am.
Part of it, I think there's a messaging thing here in the United States. The entire presentation was all ISIS, and most of what we talked about is ISIS, but your last slide and the headlines say ISIL.
Yep.
And I know it's related to the actual geography, but then I also look at that and go, if ISIL in US, does that mean a whole new acronym? And as a low information voter, am I going to go, now who are we we.
Yeah, who's ISIS or who's Islamic State and who's ISIL and who's Daesh? Okay, they're having a hard time with identity and branding. Okay, so we'll send them into Hollywood and get them straightened out.
I mean, I think it's the press here. I think ISIS knows exactly who they are.
Yeah, they call themselves something else. But the whole point is, if they want you to kill, if it's a perverted sense of Islam and it's out there in that part of the world, then that's probably the same group that we're talking about. And that's not what we want.
If we were serious about what we were doing, we call them one thing only. Mufsidun. Mufsidun is the Arabic or is the word for monster. Because what they do is they kill people.
Well,
And
is there a way
so-
to use a word like that would then get the more peaceful Muslims to also side?
Exactly.
Because I work with Muslims,
Exactly.
and again, it's the same. These aren't the people that are doing that, but they're also not the ones standing up going, no, that's wrong, stop doing that.
And the issue with the naming in and of itself is these guys rename themselves every 6 months. I mean, they started out as ISIS, then they became ISIL, but their long name is like,
Those are-
it's
those
like,
are our names,
Those
though.
are our names.
Our names.
yeah, but their long name is,
Even in the Muslim world, for the derogatory, it's the Daesh. I mean,
Yeah,
that's, I mean,
but we're not gonna, we have a reason for not using that name. I mean,
What's the reason?
Yeah.
It's used in Nigeria for
We've
bribery.
all different ways to spell his name.
It's like we call them North Korea, or we can call them
All
Democratic
right.
Republic.
Verily, I'm just declaring, thank everybody for all of your time, your effort, your contributions for coming.